Stefan Mueller was a man who seemed to have it all. In his mid-30s, he was a successful architect with a loving wife, Laura, and two adorable children, Emma and Leo. They lived in a charming suburban neighborhood where the trees lined the streets and the houses all had neatly trimmed lawns. From the outside, their lives looked like a picture-perfect example of domestic bliss. Stefan's life revolved around his family. He had a demanding job, but he made sure to spend as much time as possible with Laura and the kids. Evenings at the Mueller household were filled with laughter and stories, as Stefan would recount his day at work and listen to Emma's and Leo's adventures. They had a routine that brought them comfort: family dinners, bedtime stories, and weekend outings to the park or the zoo. Stefan felt blessed to have such a loving and supportive family. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic family life, cracks were beginning to form. Stefan had been feeling restless and disconnected from Laura. The pressures of his job and the responsibilities of fatherhood weighed heavily on him, and he found himself yearning for something more. This discontent was something he couldn't quite put into words, and he kept it hidden from everyone, including Laura. Despite the outward appearance of contentment, the relationship between Stefan and Laura had started to deteriorate. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a gradual distancing that neither of them could fully comprehend. Stefan's demanding job required long hours, often keeping him late at the office or forcing him to travel. This left Laura feeling isolated and overwhelmed with the responsibilities of caring for their young children on her own. Laura missed the days when she and Stefan were inseparable, sharing dreams and ambitions, staying up late to talk about everything and nothing. Now, their conversations were mostly about logistics: who would pick up the kids, what to make for dinner, and what bills needed to be paid. The intimacy that once defined their marriage was fading, replaced by a routine that felt more like a business partnership than a loving relationship. Stefan, on the other hand, felt trapped. He loved Laura, but the spark that had once ignited their romance seemed to have vanished. The pressures of his job were immense, and the burden of being the primary breadwinner weighed heavily on him. He began to resent the predictability of his life, yearning for the passion and excitement that he felt were missing. Stefan started staying at work later and later, not just because of the workload, but because he dreaded coming home to the same monotonous routine. It was during one of these late nights at the office that Stefan met Darla. She was a new hire in the company, brought in as a consultant to help with a major project. Darla was everything Stefan felt was lacking in his life: vibrant, confident, and unabashedly flirtatious. She had an aura of danger and excitement that captivated him from the moment they met. Darla was strikingly beautiful, with long red hair that cascaded down her back and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through him. Her body was a work of art, with curves that drew every eye in the room. She carried herself with a sensual grace that left Stefan breathless. From their first conversation, Stefan was hooked. Darla was not only attractive but also incredibly intelligent and charismatic. She had a way of making him feel alive, reigniting a passion within him that he thought had been extinguished long ago. Their professional interactions quickly became personal. They started having lunch together, where their conversations were filled with laughter and flirtation. Stefan found himself confiding in Darla, sharing his frustrations and dreams in a way he hadn't with anyone in years. She listened intently, her eyes never leaving his, and offered him comfort and understanding. It wasn't long before their lunches turned into dinners, and those dinners into late-night drinks. The sexual tension between them was palpable, and it finally came to a head one evening after a particularly long day at the office. They had gone to a nearby bar for a few drinks, and as the night wore on, the line between colleagues and lovers blurred. Darla leaned in close, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered how much she wanted him. The words sent a shiver down his spine, and all rational thought flooded his mind. Stefan was literally consumed by Darla. Her incredible body, charm, and skills in bed drove him crazy. He was drunk on this affair. As the affair between Stefan and Darla continued, It became increasingly consuming for Stefan. The initial thrill and excitement gradually gave way to a more complicated and perilous dynamic. Darla, once the escape from his mundane life, began to reveal a darker side. Her demands for Stefan's time and attention grew more insistent and aggressive, creating a tension that Stefan struggled to manage. Darla was no longer content with stolen moments and secret rendezvous. She wanted more. She wanted all of Stefan, and she wasn't shy about expressing it. What started as subtle hints soon turned into blatant ultimatums. She would text him constantly, demanding to know where he was and who he was with. When he didn't respond quickly enough, her messages would become increasingly frantic and accusatory. "Stefan, I can't keep doing this," she told him one night as they lay in bed, their bodies still entwined from their latest passionate encounter. "I need more. I need you to be with me, really with me. I can't stand being second to your wife and kids." Stefan tried to placate her, to reassure her that he cared deeply for her, but Darla was relentless. "You need to leave her," she insisted, her voice rising. "You need to leave Laura and come be with me. We can have a real life together, not this sneaking around." Stefan was torn. He couldn't deny his feelings for Darla, the way she made him feel alive and desired. But the thought of leaving his wife and children was unimaginable. "Darla, you know I can't just walk away from my family," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "This is complicated. I love my kids. I can't just abandon them." Darla's eyes flashed with anger. "So what? I'm supposed to just wait around for you forever? Be your dirty little secret? I deserve better than that. Stefan, I deserve to be your number one." Their arguments grew more frequent and intense. Darla's demands were not just about time and attention. She wanted a commitment, a promise that he would leave his family for her. Each time Stefan hesitated or tried to explain why he couldn't, Darla's anger would flare. She would lash out, sometimes verbally, other times by throwing things in a fit of rage. Yet, despite the volatility, their physical connection remained as intense as ever. The make-up sex after their arguments was fierce and passionate, a twisted reinforcement of their toxic bond. Stefan found himself caught in a vicious cycle. He would leave Darla's apartment feeling guilty and conflicted, vowing to end the affair, only to be drawn back in by the sheer force of her personality and the intoxicating allure of their encounters. Each time he saw her, the arguments would pick up where they left off, but so would the passion. It was a roller coaster of emotions that left Stefan feeling more and more out of control. The stress of the double life began to take its toll on Stefan. He became increasingly distracted and irritable at home. Laura noticed the changes in him and tried to reach out, but Stefan was too caught up in his own turmoil to respond. He started avoiding family activities, making excuses to stay late at work, or claiming he had to travel for business. Laura, sensing something was deeply wrong, grew more anxious and concerned, but whenever she tried to talk to him about it, Stefan would shut down or become defensive. Meanwhile, Darla's behavior became more erratic. She would show up unannounced at his office, demanding to see him. She started calling his home phone, hanging up if Laura answered. Her jealousy and possessiveness were becoming unmanageable, and Stefan began to fear what she might do next. He knew he needed to end things, but the thought of Darla's reaction terrified him. The breaking point came one evening after a particularly vicious argument. Darla had been pushing him harder than ever to leave Laura. "You're a coward," she spat at him, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're just too scared to take what you really want. But I won't wait forever, Stefan. If you don't leave her, I'll make sure you regret it." The threat hung heavy in the air, and Stefan felt a chill run down his spine. He realized that Darla was becoming increasingly unstable, her obsession with him morphing into something dangerous. He needed to end it, for his sake and for his family's safety. But how could he do it without provoking her further? Stefan lay awake that night, his mind racing. He knew that continuing the affair was no longer an option, but the thought of confronting Darla filled him with dread. He could see the writing on the wall. Darla's demands were escalating, and her behavior was growing more erratic. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he was caught in the middle, unable to find a way out. With a heavy heart, Stefan made up his mind. He would meet Darla the next day and tell her that it was over. He had to reclaim control of his life before it was too late. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would push everyone involved to the brink of disaster. The next morning, Stefan felt a gnawing sense of dread as he prepared for the day. He had resolved to end things with Darla, but the thought of confronting her was almost unbearable. He rehearsed the conversation in his mind, trying to find the right words to minimize the fallout. His stomach churned with anxiety, but he knew it had to be done. The stakes were too high, and he couldn't risk his family's safety any longer. Stefan texted Darla, asking to meet her at a quiet cafe away from their usual haunts. He chose the location carefully, hoping the public setting would keep her reaction somewhat restrained. When he arrived, he found a secluded corner and waited, his heart pounding in his chest. Darla arrived a few minutes later, her eyes lighting up as she saw him. She looked stunning as always, her presence magnetic and overwhelming. "Hey, you," she greeted him with a sultry smile, leaning in to kiss him. Stefan pulled back slightly, and her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Darla, we need to talk," Stefan said, his voice trembling slightly. He could see the change in her eyes immediately, the warmth draining away to be replaced by a steely coldness. "Talk about what?" she demanded, her tone sharp. She sat down across from him, her eyes boring into his. "Darla, this has to stop," Stefan began, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't keep doing this. It's not fair to Laura, to my kids, or to us. This affair, it's a mistake." Darla's eyes widened, and her lips curled into a sneer. "A mistake? That's what you think this is? A mistake?" She leaned forward, her voice rising. "I gave you everything, Stefan. Everything. And now you want to throw it all away." Stefan tried to stay calm, but he could feel the situation slipping out of control. "Darla, please understand. I care about you, but I can't leave my family. This isn't right. You're asking too much." Darla's face contorted with rage. "I'm asking too much. All I ever asked was for you to choose me, to be with me. And now you're saying I'm the problem." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The other patrons in the cafe turned to look, sensing the tension. "Darla, keep your voice down," Stefan pleaded, trying to avoid a scene. "We can talk about this calmly." "Calmly?" Darla hissed. "You want calm. After you led me on, made me believe we had a future together. You're a coward, Stefan. A pathetic coward." Stefan felt the weight of her words, the truth and anger behind them cutting deep. He stood up, reaching for her hand. "Darla, I'm sorry. I really am. But this can't go on. It's over." Darla yanked her hand away, her eyes wild with fury and hurt. "You think you can just walk away from me? After everything we've been through? No, Stefan, this isn't over. Not by a long shot." She turned on her heel and stormed out of the cafe, leaving Stefan standing there, shaken and guilt-ridden. He knew he had done the right thing, but the fear of what Darla might do next loomed large in his mind. He watched her leave, feeling a mix of relief and dread. The next few days were tense and nerve-wracking. Stefan avoided Darla's calls and texts, hoping that she would calm down and accept the end of their relationship. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Darla wasn't the type to let go easily, and her parting words echoed ominously in his mind. One evening, as Stefan was driving home from work, his phone rang. It was Darla. His heart raced as he debated whether to answer. He took a deep breath and pressed the call button, hoping to find some way to defuse the situation. "Stefan," Darla's voice came through, trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't do this to me. I won't let you." "Darla, please," Stefan said, trying to keep his voice steady. We need to move on. This isn't healthy for either of us. Healthy? She spat. You think this is about health? I love you, Stefan, and if I can't have you, no one will. Do you hear me? No one. Stefan's blood ran cold. He could hear the madness in her voice, the dangerous edge that had been creeping in for weeks. Darla, you're scaring me. You need to let this go. Let it go. She laughed, a chilling, unhinged sound. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to walk away and leave me with nothing. I'll make sure you pay, Stefan. I'll make sure you regret this. Before he could respond, she hung up, leaving Stefan gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. He realized he had underestimated the depth of Darla's obsession and the lengths she would go to keep him. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he felt powerless to stop it. The following day, as Stefan was sitting in his office, his phone buzzed with a call from Laura. He answered, trying to sound normal despite the turmoil within. Stefan, something strange just happened, Laura said, her voice filled with unease. An old classmate of yours, Darla, showed up at the house. She said she was in town and wanted to catch up. I thought it was odd, but I let her in. She said she'd wait for you. Stefan's heart sank. Laura, listen to me very carefully. You need to get out of the house. Now. What? Why? Laura sounded confused and alarmed. Just do it, Laura. Take the kids and get out. Stefan's voice rose with panic. But it was too late. Stefan heard a commotion on the other end of the line, followed by a chilling voice he recognized all too well. Hello, Stefan, Darla said, her voice eerily calm. If you want your precious wife and children to stay safe, you'll come home. Now. And don't even think about calling the police, or I'll slit her throat right in front of your kids. Stefan's mind raced. He couldn't call the police, not without putting his family in immediate danger. He needed help, someone he could trust. He dialed his best friend, Dave, and quickly explained the situation. Dave, I need you to go to my house now. Go to the back and wait for me. Darla's there, and she's dangerous. I'm on my way, Dave replied without hesitation. Hang in there, Stefan. Stefan sped home, his thoughts a blur of fear and desperation. He had to protect his family, but the situation was spiraling out of control faster than he could handle. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw the lights on inside the house, casting ominous shadows. Taking a deep breath, Stefan steeled himself and walked towards the front door, praying that he could find a way to save his family and end this nightmare once and for all. Stefan's heart raced as he drove home, the tension palpable. The image of Darla holding a knife to Laura's throat haunted him. He needed to stay calm and think clearly, but the stakes had never been higher. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw the lights on in the house, and a sense of dread settled over him. Entering the house, Stefan found Laura sitting on the living room couch, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. Darla stood beside her, the knife pressed against Laura's throat. Emma and Leo huddled in a corner, crying softly. The scene was a nightmare come to life. Darla, Stefan began, trying to keep his voice steady. He knew he had to buy time. You don't need to do this. Let them go, and we can talk. Darla's eyes blazed with fury, her grip on the knife tightening. Her words were a mixture of anger and desperation, reflecting the depth of her obsession and betrayal. She accused Stefan of making promises he never intended to keep, of treating her like she was nothing. The intensity of her emotions was overwhelming, and Stefan felt trapped. He tried to calm her, suggesting they could find a solution without violence, but Darla was beyond reason. Her demands for him to leave his family and be with her were non-negotiable. Stefan realized he had underestimated her instability, and the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Stefan glanced toward the back of the house, hoping Dave was in position. He needed to keep Darla focused on him until Dave could act. With every word, Stefan tried to sound sincere, promising to leave with her if she let his family go. It was a desperate gamble, one he prayed would work. For a moment, it seemed like Darla might relent. Her grip on the knife loosened slightly, her eyes searching Stefan's face for any sign of deceit. But then, a noise from the back of the house shattered the fragile calm. It was Dave, making his move. Darla whipped around, her eyes wild with panic. In an instant, Dave burst into the room, tackling Darla from behind. The force of his attack knocked her off balance, and she dropped the knife. Stefan lunged forward, grabbing the weapon and pulling Laura away from Darla's reach. Darla thrashed wildly, her screams filling the room as she fought against Dave's hold. Emma and Leo were crying, their little bodies shaking with fear. Stefan scooped them up in his arms, holding them close as he backed away. He whispered reassurances, trying to comfort them despite the chaos. Dave, a large and imposing man, managed to pin Darla to the ground despite her frantic struggles. She was incredibly strong for her size, her desperation lending her an almost superhuman strength. Stefan fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he dialed 911. The operator's voice was a lifeline as he quickly explained the situation. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. Darla, realizing she was outmatched, let out a final, anguished scream. The police burst through the door, weapons drawn. They quickly took control, handcuffing Darla and pulling her to her feet. She continued to struggle, her eyes locked on Stefan with a mix of rage and heartbreak. The officers led Darla away, her screams fading into the night. Stefan turned to his family, his heart breaking at the sight of Laura's tear-streaked face and the fear in his children's eyes. He had put them in unimaginable danger, and the weight of his actions crashed down on him. Dave approached, a reassuring hand on Stefan's shoulder. His presence was a comfort in the aftermath of the chaos. "They're safe now," Dave said, his voice steady. "You did the right thing." Stefan nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dave. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You don't have to do this alone," Dave replied. "We're here for you." The days following Darla's arrest were filled with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Stefan often found his thoughts drifting back to that harrowing night, wondering what had driven Darla to such extremes. His family was safe, but the emotional scars were still fresh, and he knew that healing would take time. One morning, Stefan received a call from the police station. The officer on the line informed him that Darla's behavior had become even more alarming since her arrest. Stefan agreed to visit the station to discuss the details. Upon arriving, Detective Harris led him to a small private office. The detective explained that when Darla was brought in, she had been extremely agitated. She had tried to bite the officers and had even attempted to break the chains on her handcuffs. It took several officers to restrain her and prevent her from harming herself or others. Detective Harris then revealed that Darla had been evaluated by a mental health professional and diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. This condition explained her erratic behavior and intense emotional reactions. The specialist explained that people with this disorder could appear completely normal, but could be triggered by specific stressors. In Darla's case, the trigger was Stefan's perceived distance and rejection. The diagnosis meant that she would be committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment rather than facing a traditional prison sentence. This decision aimed to ensure that she received the help she desperately needed while protecting the public from any further outbursts. Laura was distant, her eyes reflecting a pain that words couldn't capture. She moved through the house like a ghost, barely acknowledging Stefan's presence. Emma and Leo were quieter than usual, their innocence marred by the fear they had experienced. Stefan, feeling like an intruder in his own home, tried to reach out, but found himself met with a wall of hurt and mistrust. One evening, Laura made the decision that would change everything. She had thought long and hard about their situation and concluded that staying in the marriage was impossible. The betrayal and danger Stefan had brought into their lives were too much to forgive. She needed to protect herself and the children, and that meant filing for divorce. Stefan, though devastated, understood her decision. He had known this was coming, but the finality of it still hit him hard. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and difficult conversations. Stefan moved out of the family home and into a small apartment nearby. He spent every moment he could with Emma and Leo, trying to rebuild their trust and reassure them of his love. Every visit was a painful reminder of the life he had shattered. Dave continued to be a steadfast support, helping Stefan navigate the emotional and practical challenges of his new reality. They spent many evenings talking, Dave offering advice and a listening ear. Stefan leaned on him heavily, grateful for his unwavering friendship. Stefan picked up Emma and Leo for weekend visits, trying to create a semblance of normalcy. They were slowly starting to open up again, but the trauma they had experienced lingered. He focused on making their time together as positive as possible, filled with activities and reassurances of his love. Despite the turmoil, Stefan was determined to turn his life around. He started seeing a therapist, working through his issues, and learning to manage his emotions better. He took up new hobbies, finding solace in activities that helped him stay grounded and centered. Slowly but surely, he began to heal. Laura, meanwhile, was finding her own path to recovery. She saw a therapist as well and focused on creating a stable and nurturing environment for the kids. Despite the pain and betrayal, she and Stefan managed to maintain a civil relationship for the sake of their children. One day, as Stefan was dropping the kids off at Laura's house, he realized the enormity of what he had almost lost. He had made terrible mistakes, allowed his desires to cloud his judgment, and nearly destroyed his family. But he also realized he had a chance to make things right, to rebuild his life, and become the father his children needed.